Well, it was an interesting time to go to Arlington. You know, a lot was going on in the world. A lot was happening in Arlington Heights.
It wasn't until in the early 70s that really the whole world, and especially the United States, changed. So going to school at Arlington in the 60s was a mirror of the 50s.
We weren't very politicized. I mean, it was still, you know, if there had to be any politics, it was probably the Young Republicans Club. You know, you didn't see anything, you know, reflecting what was going on in the world.
One of the reasons I wanted to go to Arlington and not to Prospect was the tradition involved with the school. The building just had this sense of everyone that had gone before you. The pictures on the wall of the athletes that, you know, were standout athletes when you walked through the halls by the gym.
Arlington had a very upbeat school spirit mood. It had a very focused educational mood. It was a school that had community, a place where you felt at home.
Nobody wanted to leave this building after school was over. They'd sit in the halls in groups, 5, 6 here, and just talk and visit. Everybody had a lot of respect for each other, and the young people, I think, there had a lot of respect for old-timers, and you know, what they said carried some weight.
I had some great teachers. Mr. Kaufman, he was a world history teacher when I was a sophomore. We were studying the Middle East when the Six-Day War started, and so that was all part of our classroom. And he was just so involved and so vibrant and alive about the subject. It really inspired me, and I've loved history, you know, studying history ever since. And Doug Murphy, he inspired me to keep doing theater. Miss Black was another history teacher. You knew Miss Black. Miss Black could teach American history because she was there for most of it. You couldn't staple your papers together. That wasn't approved. You had to glue your papers together. You couldn't slide into your seat. You had to sit, because that was the proper way young men and women sat in a seat. Her hair was iron gray, and it just didn't move, you know, and she had a passion for teaching and a passion for history that stayed with me.
As in the 1940s and 50s, the town of Arlington Heights, especially the downtown business district, continued to play an instrumental role in the high school experience.
I remember the homecoming parades and the floats, and I remember my senior year, our float won, and it was in 36, they settled the range, and in 61 we'll tame LaGrange. And that was like the 125th year for Arlington Heights. Homecoming was always exciting, with the big white mum with the pipe cleaner A in the middle of it, and everybody had to have one of those, and the ribbon that hung down.
They used to let us off early to go watch the parades. You know, they let the kids go, you know, from the grade schools to go downtown and watch the homecoming parade, which was kind of cool.
We spent a lot of time at Recreation Park and the Arlington Theater and the 53 Drive-In. Seaberg's Drugs. I used to work at the jewelry store, which was at the corner of Campbell and Dunton. Kresge's over at Dryden Plaza. Well, we'd go over there sometimes.
Larry, is there any places you guys hung out?
A lot of the same places. Some of them went through different, like Seaberg's, I think, that became Countryside Inn. We'd go to Kresge's and Raps. Harris Pharmacy.
Yeah.
Harris Pharmacy for a Lime Ricky or a Cherry Coke, you know, made from scratch, you know.
We had one place to go. The Cellar started during my high school years. It started in the old St. Peter gym in the basement there. And then they moved across the tracks there where the old Buick dealership, the post office, was.
Greens Park, you know, we'd hang out in the woods. We had woods and all kinds of places to go. You know, as you were growing up, the Kellogg property there on Arlington Heights Road, there were always fields and prairies and all kinds of stuff. The air was charged with electricity on a fall night, going to a Friday night football game in Arlington. The smell of leaves burning I miss that so much. You know, the smell of leaves in the neighborhood and the lights in Arlington. You hear the drumming and you're walking to Arlington and you're going to see a game.
One of the fun part of football games too was when they were away games, because they always had a pep bus. And all you did was pay a quarter or a dollar, whatever it was, and you rode the pep bus, and then you cheered all the way there. And another thing about cheering, the cheerleaders led cheers. Mm-hmm. That was the fun. I mean, they stood out in front of us and led us in our cheering, and we had the signs that you held up and all of that. You were involved in the game.
The village of Arlington Heights continued to change its shape throughout the 60s, with the construction of a new municipal building in 1962 and the Memorial Library in 1968. The high school, too, underwent a number of small construction projects and added some aesthetic flourishes in the 1960s. Perhaps most notably, the Jim Foyer's iconic Cardinal Seal was presented by the class of 1960.
One of the fathers of a student who was in the tile business did the seal. I recall as the advisor for the Letterman's Club, we would have our ritual in the evening around that seal. As a result, during lunch periods, if you can recall, the jocks would be sitting on those benches. And if some punky frosh dared step on that seal, he was out the door, not touching any of the ground between the two. Even non-jocks didn't walk on it. For whatever reason, it became an icon.
Arlington's spirit reached an all-time high thanks to stellar athletic performances throughout the 1960s. The gymnastics team, as well as the tennis and cross-country squads, all took home state champion trophies in the 60s. Not to be outdone, the 1966 football team also became an indomitable force.
It's a blur like everything in the past. The seasons certainly went too fast. As a freshman, had a good group, good nucleus, seemed to have all the right players in the right spots. And so then you joined them together with a really strong junior group, because the junior group under Bob Walther was outstanding as well the next year, the 67 team. Al Allen did a fine job coaching us, and he had some great assistants. And together with that junior group, we had a good group of kids. And so.
They had everything, a great passer, Steve Allen, and running backs, and Conley, receivers in Lockwood, and guys like this stuffing the runners, and it was really a good team. I mean, I'd be curious to see how they could play today against some of these teams, because I think they could hold their own.
The escalation of the Vietnam War in the mid-60s and the resulting countercultural movements were not immediately felt in the sleepy suburban town of Arlington Heights. But stark reminders of the changing times grew more frequent as the decade wore on.
We used to go down to Old Town every weekend. We'd hop in a car once we got our driver's licenses. We'd go down to Chicago, go to Old Town. Well, we went to Old Town on Sunday night, the Sunday that the Democratic Convention was kicking off. Lincoln Park was just full of tents and teepees and yurts and guitars strumming and the smell of marijuana, which we didn't know what it was, because I think only one kid at Arlington smoked marijuana at that time. And all of a sudden the Chicago police moved down North Avenue and started pulling people out of just playing guitars, pulling them out, throwing them in the back of squad rolls. Yes, first time I ever saw somebody using a nightstick and they're hitting people and grabbing, and nothing was done. They were just singing. Like everybody else, I watched the Democratic Convention and all the events on television the rest of the week, because no way I was gonna get involved in that, because it just looked a little too iffy.
While many young Arlington students avoided active service in Vietnam, others were not so lucky. Larry recalls his first encounter with the horrors of war.
The war in Vietnam came home to me when I was working at the funeral home. I was in the diversified occupation program at Arlington, where I'd go to school in the morning and I'd go to work in the afternoon. And my chosen profession, I was going to be a funeral director. We got a soldier that was killed in Vietnam, a young guy. He was a helicopter pilot. He was a warrant officer in the Army. And I helped with the removal at the airport, picking up the remains, bringing them back to the funeral home, and opened up the shipping crate, and there's a gunmetal gray casket in the shipping crate. And I was working with the funeral director, Balmer, and he said, well, it says non-viewable remains. He says, well, I don't trust the Army embalmers. Let's see what we can do. Maybe we can, give the family something to hold on to. And he opened up the casket, and there was a sheet of metal. And he goes, that's non-viewable. You open up the foot end, and there is a glass plate. The glass plate would be reversed if the remains were viewable, and if not, the steel plate was there. He lifted the plate out, and there, lying in the casket, was an Army dress uniform with the arms folded, white gloves in the sleeves, the hat folded down. The body was not in the uniform. The uniform was laid out perfectly over the body bag. And he said, well, we're not going any farther. And that brought Vietnam home to me. It was probably one of the most seminal moments of my life. I realized I'm a junior in high school. This guy's not much older than me, and this is what he's come to. that moment was one of the moments of my life.
I don't know that it was different from other high schools, but I do know that it has left a lasting impression on me throughout my entire life, both in the areas of academics and socially.
Everybody who went there, it helped to, give them a big chunk of who they are. It's just a building, but wow, the memories that the people I know, the people I still know, I still hang around with.
I still have contact with people that I went to school with, and the one thing that I'm always reminded of is what fine, wonderful people they are, and how lucky I was to have gone to high school with them, and to realize today that Arlington High School produced many, many wonderful and fine people.